Hello YouTube, Mandibil here. This is part 3 of my deconstruction of an old video by Stefan Molyneux discussing UPB with a caller, and the video is called Is Morality Subjective? Nihilist versus Philosopher. And please go and check out the part 1 and 2 first before you venture further into this one. If you want the full package. But let's just start off, and hopefully we can get to sort of close to the end in this part 3.
As soon as somebody doesn't hold...
No, that's universally preferred, not preferable. And again, I've gone over this so many times.
But
it's
the
ridiculous,
means,
right?
the means
So of course there are lots.
So now we have to distinguish between preferable and preferred. And apparently there is a world of difference between these two terms. And yes, of course there is. These are two different meanings of the same basic word that is sort of preference or something like that. Preferred and preferable. So what, I mean, if there's a very big difference between these two words that are so easy to conflate or mix up, it's not a very good way of using words as one of the cornerstones of your ethics, if it's so easily confused with a word that sounds almost like it and have a meaning that could easily be misinterpreted as being that which you are talking about, which is then apparently isn't. So let us get the sort of definition.
Lots of people who disagree with the non-initiation of force. Lots of people who spank, people who like wars that are initiated in an imperial fashion, people who hit their wives, people who steal, people either directly or indirectly. There's tons of people who are perfectly willing and happy and consider it moral to initiate the use of force. I don't know what. So yeah, there are people who disagree with philosophy. Guess what? That's why that's philosophy. Like there's this weird thing where people say somehow we need to get a philosophical theory to the same level as a physics theory. Like physics is like this.
Weren't you the guy? I'm not. I see. Now we're jumping away from this preferred and preferable. It sort of runs out in the sand what we were talking about there. So let's forget about that. But you're the kind of guy who says UPP equals scientific method, right? Physics is another way of saying scientific method. Or at least it's a very huge subset of science, which is physics. So you have equated UPB with scientific method. You have done that in a video called UPB Redux, or was it in the called UPB Revisited? I'm not sure, but one of those two, you said UPB equals scientific method. And now you're saying ethics or ethics can't reach the level of physics. So now you're saying there's a difference between the scientific method and ethics. What are you trying to say? So you're shooting your own foot. You are devaluing your own arguments. So you're just shooting left and right as you apparently see fit. So nothing, even in this ridiculous book called UPB that is hard to wrap your head around, you're contradicting your central arguments within it and your backup videos for it by saying, no, we can't reach the level of physics at the same time as you say UPB is the same as the scientific method. Holy crap.
It gives all intellectuals this massive boner to think that they're approaching the certainty of physics. But the whole point of physics is physics does not involve human consciousness. Philosophy can never...
So now we are getting to an interesting concept or interesting idea. That is, you can't get to consciousness. Well, now you're trying to deal with the hard problem of consciousness. I would hope so. Let's see.
Ever conceivably approach the level of physics. Because if it did, it wouldn't be dealing with human beings anymore, and choice and free will and values and morals and so on. And so naturally, everybody wants to get to this realm of physics. They think it's going to close off the debate. But the only thing that's relative to physics is physical matter alone, right? Without the confusing mess called human consciousness that throws us back.
No. Matter is that part of your experience that describes something outside your mind, but it's still a description that is inside your mind. When you say matter, you're referring to something that is in your mind. It might be based on something outside your mind, but your experience of it is in your mind. You need to understand this. This is extremely important, right? You can't experience that which is outside your mind exactly because it is outside your mind. Think about it, right? Just spend a few minutes thinking about this paradox.
And in the whole works of mere physics. And you need a philosophy like discipline for the same reason that you need a philosophy like nutrition for human beings, but you don't need a philosophy called nutrition or a methodology called nutrition for rocks, because rocks don't eat, human beings eat, and you don't need necessarily a nutrition that you're going to lecture ants on what to eat, because they'll basically eat whatever spills off the kid's ice cream cone. So human beings are in a unique position, and this is why we need philosophy. We can never get external values, external blah, blah, blah. I mean, there's no laws of physics out there that dominate human behavior. Otherwise.
So why do you equate UPB with the scientific method, right? If you do that in some other fashion, that you say you need the scientific method in some way or another at some point when you're using a moral principle, okay, I can go with that. But in a video you said UPB is the scientific method, more or less like that, right? It couldn't be misinterpreted in any other way. If you state UPB equals scientific method, it's a far thing to come and say now that no, you can't get to, it's experience, and there's the reality out here, and they are disconnected, and implicitly stating that there's a hard problem of consciousness, which he has never referred to or never dealt with in any form that would suggest that he understands that there actually is this problem called the hard problem of consciousness, that materialists just like wander over, just like ethicists walk over the Isort gap from Hume.
We'd all be determinists, and there'd be no such thing as philosophy. Philosophy is you attempt to encourage people to think more rationally, or just to think rationally, to use empiricism, to listen to the evidence, and to have that which they claim to be universal actually be universal. So the fact that there's no values out there, it's like, well, of course there aren't, right? I mean, there's gravity out there. There's the inverse square law operating out there. There's a wide variety of, electromagnetic forces all operating out there, independent of human consciousness, for sure. But there's nothing to do with ethics. Ethics is centered around the capacity of human beings to choose. And I'd like human beings to make better choices, which is why I sort of lay out ethical theories that are universal and empirical and consistent and rational.
But why don't you go and make a moral principle then, right? I mean, it's a very weak way of doing ethics to say, I'm going to, make some ethics that doesn't create a moral principle, but creates a method for how to check moral principles, right? So there are a lot of loose ends in this approach to doing ethics. In my opinion, ethics starts with first you do metaphysics, then you do epistemology, and then you reach an idea of objectivity, and then you start doing ethics, and then it will sort of condense into a moral principle. And the moral principle is what you use in everyday activities to secure that you don't end up in an immoral situation. Nobody says that you have to follow it, but then you should get the consequences that you deserve from whatever you are going to do. But you have just stopped 10% before the finishing line and say, okay, now I'm going to bring in the non-aggression principle that I haven't proved, I'm just, found it somewhere in a book, and I'm going to run it through, and okay, it checks out. So I guess I'm right already, right? I was right about the non-aggression principle even before I wrote the book, and I haven't proven the non-aggression principle. I have never referred to any proof of the non-aggression principle. Actually, I've never told anybody what really entails in something being a moral principle. What does it take for something to be a moral principle? No, that is not described anywhere, right? So this idea of it's so loose that he can easily go around and say, I think you should do this, and I think you should do that, and he can tie it somehow to UPB because it's so loose. And maybe that's what he wants to do. He don't want to be confined to a very strict and explicitly strong moral principle, because then he couldn't go around telling people what they should think and how they should act and if they should be single mother or not, right? It's so fluffy, this UPB, that he can state practically anything, right? And then argue from some sort of, in the clouds, and then people say, yeah, I guess he's right, because he's the only one who understands UPB.
Accord with our basic concepts of good and bad, like, don't hit, don't steal, don't rape, don't kill, and so on.
Don't hit? But what about that guy coming at you with a knife? Don't hit? Well, why? I mean, this has got, you can't go around saying don't hit, don't steal, don't. This is bullshit. This is just Christianity. Why don't you say read the Bible and follow the 10 Commandments instead? Because that's basically what you're saying. Why do you need this elaborate bunch of words called UPB in 130 pages? If you are just going to say, don't steal, don't rape, don't 10 commandments, it's not what ethics is, right? It's not just proving what everybody already knows, and you actually state that in your book. If you prove that what everybody already does, you haven't really done anything, right? And if there's potentially a lot of things in the world that doesn't work in a moral fashion according to your own judgment, then you should find something that sort of sticks in another direction, or people say, why would you want to do that? Yeah, but that's because there's a lot of things wrong in the world. That means that the moral principles should point in a very different direction, not in the direction of how people already act according to whatever moral principles are out there, right? So it should be something different, but you will never get at that, because you're not defining a moral principle, which is a gigantic weakness of your ethics.
So the idea that there are no values out there, I don't know, somehow this is considered to be a negative for philosophy. But
I'm thinking of an analogy. It's like you have invented, the way Stefan Molyneux is doing ethics is like, okay, I'm going to make a framework for, this is an analogy, right? Framework for making bicycles. Okay. I'm going to make a bicycle, and I'm going to, I have what's it called, the stiff part, and the steer, and the pedals, and the chain, and then there are some things that should be here that touches the ground, right? And then he's saying, well, you go out and figure out what to put there, right? Why don't you do the rest? Why don't you do the rest? Why don't you invent the wheel, right? And put them on the bicycle and say, this is how it should work. And describe when you're bicycling, you should do this, you do that, and the third and the other, and so on. But you're creating this 80% finished product and saying, you go out and figure the rest, right? It's like you don't have the balls to go all the way out of fear that you might actually have to stand your ground with a moral principle, which is a tough thing to do. Absolutely. But that's what it takes to be a moral philosopher.
It's like saying we don't need nutrition because rocks don't have stomachs. It's like, of course, rocks don't have stomachs. Human beings have stomachs, and human beings can make choices about what to eat. And yes, values don't exist out there in the universe like the laws of physics do. That's exactly why the
laws of physics don't exist out there neither. They are also just mental constructs. They are descriptions of how things behave, so they're not out there.
such a thing as moral philosophy, because it's specific to human beings and their capacity to choose. And yeah, human beings will make bad choices. But the better the moral case you make, I think the better choices people can make.
But I'm not making any of those arguments. I mean, look, I really appreciate...
Wait, hang on. You were talking about Ayn Rand's values out there, right? Values, yes. Objective values out there.
No.
So are you not making that argument?
No, I didn't say that the values existed out there. I said that what Ayn Rand said was that people had to, not even had to value, but that generally people valued one thing, which are universally valued one major thing, which was living, and that because they valued living, that rationality was one of the biggest, one of the best tools to enhance living. Therefore, it was a virtue, and then she derived some other virtues from that too, and immoralities. And the reason why she failed in her ethical theory was because the value was subjective. Not every moral agent valued living, or at least
I don't think that's why. I don't think that's why she failed.
No, no. So now he's wandering into all sorts of problems now, and he's going to be, torn apart by Stefan Molyneux now. I'm certain. If you don't value living, no, but while you're alive, you must be value at least being alive, not living as having a long life or something like that. But you value being alive until you don't want to be alive anymore. But the point of Ayn Rand is that she's saying that there's sort of the problem with selfishness is that selfishness is your sort of the driving force of your virtue, right? It's the virtue of selfishness. That is, you have a rationality where you reason about things that are valuable to you. The rationality is then subjective in the sense that what you are reasoning about is what you value the result of. The actions you are going to perform based on those kind of reasonings are those results that are valuable to all, at least that you have an idea are valuable to you, right? So I'm not at the moment sort of reasoning about how I could find an anteater, right? Because that's not valuable to me at this moment, right? I'm more thinking of something like where's my next meal going to come from, or is my iPhone fully powered up, or something like that instead, right? Just examples. So she would say it's virtuous that you follow that which is rational. But the problem is with Ayn Rand, I would suppose, is that she is going to tell you what is rational. That doesn't work, because rationality is exactly that which is valuable to you to reason about. And what is valuable to me to reason about is only something I have the, quote, subjective access to, because those are my choices of reasoning based on my personal value. So you can't get to an objective rationality. That is a contradiction of understandings of what rationality means. And that is probably where she goes astray, because she's going to tell you what you should take as being a rational goal in life to some extent, right? And you can only have that if you're alive. If you're dead, it doesn't matter, right? So now he's going to be torn apart. Absolutely, I'm certain.
I mean, certainly everyone who's alive must value living over dying, because dying is what happens when you don't do anything to sustain life. Eat, you don't, right? So,
yeah, so no,
I think she failed because...
That's why I think... I'm sorry. That's why... that's why I think the solution to your moral theory is, because the latter half of this book, when you get into the ethical categories and the maxims and the logic for defining good and stuff, once you have the value, makes a lot of sense. I mean, it's a quantum leap forward in ethics. But
okay, I beg to differ on that part. He's sort of licking his ass now, right? He's appealing to his vanity. So that's not, and I'm sure that he senses that. He senses that he's like the underdog, showing his belly and
the problem I'm having is with, I mean, if I could resolve in myself the whole UPB thing, I would totally accept the rest of your theory.
Okay,
but
let's just jump back to Rand. To me, Rand failed because the Pope is rich.
Okay.
Right, so she says life is the highest standard of value, that which is rational best serves life, and therefore we should have rationality as our highest standard of value because that's what best serves life. But the Pope is very...
Yeah, the point is, if I may interject, is that rationality is not a value in itself. Rationality is the choices of the kinds of reasonings you do, and those choices are based on what you ultimately value as a result of that reasoning, right? So the value is sort of, the reasoning you do is channeled through your value system, let's put it that way. And then you say, no, I'm not going to reason about that. I'm going to reason about that instead, because that's more valuable potential result of that reasoning in to where I'm going. But ultimately, it's to stay alive or improve the quality of your living to some extent. So the caller basically shot himself in the foot by talking about dying or something like that, right? But rationality is not a value in itself. It's a misunderstanding, in my opinion, of what we are talking about when we're talking about value with regards to reasoning and rationality.
Rich. And the Pope did not get rich by pursuing relentless rationality and empiricism. And so the idea that there's just like one kind...
Didn't he? Isn't it rational to start off tell people that they're gods and devils and all that, and give you your money so I'll save you? Isn't that rational? It has a certain air of rationality to, in my opinion. That it's all about, how you can manipulate the world to get what you want. That is kind of rational, isn't it? What you're referring to is that those arguments are not based in sort of objectivity. But that's not what we are dealing with. We are talking about what is rational now, right? Those actions you perform, that you're reasoning that when I say that to those people, they will give me money, or they will feel this and feel that, and they will give me money in the end. And I want that money, so they are going to, manipulate their minds with my language. Well, that's rational. Well, it may be complete nonsense, but that's not a part of what is being rational is about. Rational is about what will the result be of my actions? What can I get away with to some extent, right?
And a human being, and that is the R versus K thing and a bunch of other things too. But the idea that there's one human being and we just all need to be rational and that's going to be best for everyone, it's not the case at all. There are people who are much better at emotional manipulation than they are at critical thinking. There are people who are much better at evoking a crowd's fear and hatred and thus getting resources from them through a variety of rhetorical devices and so on, from religion to some more hysterical aspects of God.
But that doesn't mean that it's not rational. It's very rational, in the sense that they get what they want from their actions, right?
Government science and, some economic doom porn and stuff like that. So yeah, there are lots of people who are really, really great at manipulating other people to get resources. And in fact...
Like Stefan Molyneux, for instance. You're manipulating your crowd and your inner circle, and you have sort of millions and millions of dollars in cryptos and donations and so on. You're very good at manipulating, right? I have deconstructed UPB to the nth degree almost, right? And there's nothing that hangs together. It's almost non-existent what hangs together in this, right? And you keep manipulating the masses to get your resources, right? So you're the Pope of philosophy. But possibly you can't even see that yourself.
They are much better at manipulating people in terms of the resources they can get than they ever would be just competing rationally. Just think of your average priest.
No. Now you are conflating rationality and science, or something that is already imbued with morality. So you're constantly what is it, screwing with the definition, so that they have attached this and now it's not attached anymore, and now I'm using this concept idea in this term in this way, and now I'm using it another way, and now it's science, and now it's subjective, and now it's objective, and there's no coherence in anything you say. The more you try to get to the bottom of UPB, the more confused you'll become, right?
Who's got the thrilling voice and the gestures and knows how to impact an audience and say, okay, go be a physicist. Is your income going to go up or down? Well, it's going to go down, and it may in fact never go back up, because that's how his gene set or his personality type or his choices, that's what he's adapted himself to. And human beings are competing and warring set of tribes. And by that, I don't mean ethnicities necessarily, but it's just various competing capacities. Politicians attempt to lie and thrill and frighten people into giving them resources. Priests do the same thing. And again, certain aspects of crazy government science does the same thing. Some advertisers do the same thing, like, ooh, buy these sunglasses and you'll look like this great looking guy with the sunglasses, just stupid stuff like that, right? And if you don't have a Prada bag, you've lost status, or, if you don't have a 6-pack of abs, then right? So the idea that rationality is an equivalent survival strategy for every one of the wide variety of subspecies within the human condition is not valid.
I will beg to differ. It's absolutely valid. Everybody is rational all the time. And if they are not rational, it's not because they don't want to be rational or irrational. It's because they are sort of a bit out of focus, or, in a lazy afternoon or something like that, right? Then they're sort of dwindling down on their rationality, and there's something let slip. Everybody is rational all the time. Everybody. From their personal, platform, wherever they are in the sort of the IQ hierarchy or in the power structure they're in, or whatever their situation is, right? It's not irrational to be a pope, right? It's highly rational, because they get what they want. They get to control people, and just by, wearing a weird coat and saying some magic words, they get money. It's more rational than working on a night shift and get paid a lousy wage and be thrown around by a stupid boss, isn't it? Which is most rational? I mean, yeah, you may look ridiculous with a tea cozy on your head and, swinging some smoky stick or whatever they do, but it's easy money, isn't it? That's rational in my book, right?
I mean, it'd be nice if everyone was rational, but they're not. And they're a particular evolution.
Oh, yes, they are. You just misinterpret being rational as being to be following non-manipulative approaches to dealing with the world, right? You're the kind, I want to go to the store, so I will take the straight, bird's eye view line to the store and drive my car at the lowest price and whatever. That's one way to do it. But another way that gets the result in another fashion is equally rational to that person who chooses it, right? It's not because they're irrational because they want to crawl on their feet down there. It's because they have another agenda than you have. They have another way of approaching their target than you have, right? I bet you it's rational if they find out that they are sort of they're fooling themselves. They will stop immediately and say, what the hell am I doing? It was rational to me before, but now I see that it's kind of I will drive my car instead of crawling on my knees down to the store, right? And then that becomes rational. But as they did the other thing, it was rational to them, right? So rationality is a subjective standard.
Evolutionary advantages to being anti-rational, which is why if you look at Jewish history, particularly from sort of the 14th century onwards, the rabbis, again, not exactly paragons of scientific and rational inquiry, rabbis accumulated the most resources and had the most children.
So they were best at being rational, right? So they got easy money. I'm not saying that it's moral. Beware of that. I'm not talking about morality here. We're only talking about rationality. And in a way, ethics is there to inhibit unwanted rationality. Ethics is there to inhibit unwanted rationality by other individuals, and even yourself, right? You're structuring your life according to a moral principle, both to make sure that you don't intervene on other people's life in an immoral fashion, but also that other people don't do the same to you. So it's a both way kind of thing, hopefully, right? But the rationality that Ayn Rand is going for is that selfishness is always good, right? And it would lead to, balances in this and that. Maybe it works to some extent, right? But she can't say that rationality is subjective. It is always subjective. It depends on how you want to get to your goal. And the way you are going to get to your goal is rational to you. Otherwise, you wouldn't do it. Right? There's some balance of value and things that makes you do. You won't do it in a less optimal way deliberately. You will always do it in the way you find rational or the optimal way you do. You're not going to do it in the second best or the third best way. You're always going to do it in the best way. And that may not be the same way as the guy next to you, right? But both of you are rational in your own subjective way. It depends on how you want to do it, right?
And so from an evolutionary standpoint, for Ayn Rand to say, well, reason is man's, life is highest standard of value, reason best serves life's values and so on. It's like, no. For quite a lot of times in society, the least rational reproduce the most, or people who are not dedicated towards rationality reproduce the most.
Now you're conflating reasoning and rationality, right? You have to distinguish between reasoning and rationality. Reasoning is when if I take this thing here and I let it go, it will fall down to the table and make a noise, right? That's what it did. So that's reasoning. Rational is what value does it have to me? Does it have any value? Now I did it because it had value for me to show it to you on this video. But if I wasn't doing the video, I might not do this, because what value would it have to me? So the circumstances and my immediate understanding of the value of this action is what makes it rational or not, right? So it's subjective.
Maybe she just didn't know enough about evolutionary biology. Who knows, right? She did spend a lot of time indoors. So all I can say is that I don't think it's successful, because if you just look across the world, people who are the smartest and most rational are breeding the least these days, and people with the lower IQs are reproducing like, rabbits dropped in a petri dish of sperm and porn. And so I don't think that argument follows particularly well.
No,
and the Mormons, for God's sakes, right?
Look, I'm not an objectivist, but when I came across your 7 categories, I realized that this kind of fixes it, because you split aesthetically positive. You make the split of personally positive, aesthetically positive, and good, based off of the logic behind something being enforceable versus not enforceable, or something being universally preferable but not enforceable, and then not universally preferable but you like it. And she would just split it.
That's one also of those critic points, and that is where I remember I sort of ran out of steam with UPB, because it was, as far as I remember, either the very last part of part 1 or the start of part 2, after the point where he says, now I have proven UPB. Now, and then 7 categories of various ways to understand the world is created. I can't tell you how confused I am about these things, that when you're proven something, you don't go about creating 7 new categories of ways to see the world, right? He made this perfect syllogism that is absolutely a syllogism from hell. Check out I think it's part 11 of my deconstruction, where it's so ridiculous, this argument that supposedly proves UPB, that it's like, You would get an F in syllogisms if you were presenting this to some kind of if you were presenting this to Aristotle, right?
Into what is good for life and what is bad for life, and that would be the determinant.
And you wouldn't need philosophy if that could be bad, because biology selects that which is good for life. And if rationality were always that which is good for life, everybody would mostly be rational, right? In the same way, having to...
No, but I've said it, I'm repeating myself now, right? You are talking about sort of long-term evaluations of consequences for your own life. People may say, I don't care about brushing my teeth, and that's not rational. Stefan would say. I would say all people at all times do what they think is rational, but it does the same as they get the results that they think they get, but then they change their behavior later and say, now I'm going to rationalize in a new way. But that rationalization was to some extent a result of how I rationalized earlier. But nobody is acting in the second best or third best or fourth best way that they think they could act in a given situation. It depends on their emotional state and what they want in the now and what they want in the long term, or whether or not they care about the long term or whatever. You can't say that people are not rational. You can say, I wouldn't do the same thing. That's fine. But that's your rationality. That is not their rationality. So again, there's one of these points where it seems to be all over the place at the same and nowhere at the same time, right?
2 legs is really good for a human life because, 3, it's just crazy. And so biology selects through evolution that which is good for life. And so the idea that Ayn Rand would regularly say, well, the vast majority of people are irrational, but rationality is really great for life. It's like, well, shouldn't evolution have taken care of this for us?
Yeah, but that's a very valid critique of her philosophy. I would say that destroys her ethics, basically, right?
And so, I don't think that she solves it.
No, I'm not saying she solves it. I'm saying these ethical categories solve it, because she identified, and I think correctly, the universal value, which was living. And you correctly identified how you could, through logic, how you could split aesthetically positive and good, which was enforceable through violence. That's your split. You could put things like rationality into an aesthetically positive, because you could prove rationality as a universally preferable to the means of the quality of life, but you couldn't put it as the good. It wasn't evil for you to be irrational. It was just aesthetically negative. That's why I think your categories solve her problem. But your ethical categories only matter when there is a universal value in the first place, which is living.
No, it's not. No, look, there's tons of people who kill themselves. There are tons of people who sacrifice their own life for other people.
They're not moral
but they make the choice to sacrifice their life for some other goal. There are people who sacrifice. I'm sorry?
It doesn't matter.
If life is the highest standard of value, then wouldn't we do everything possible to maintain it and not kill ourselves for the sake of some other value?
No, it's not that life is the highest value. It's that life is the universal value, as in every moral agent, everyone who can be considered a moral agent values living. Those who are dead, or
how do you explain suicide bombers?
They're dead. They're not moral agents anymore.
Oh my God! You can't be this dense. Come on. Do you not think they make the choice to strap on some explosive and blow themselves up?
Of course they do, but until the moment that they die, they still value living.
Yeah.
I don't even know what to say.
They value being alive. Because if they die before they have to blow up something over there, they won't be able to blow that up. So they have to value being alive until they reach that point where they no longer need to be alive, but are blowing themselves up to reach some kind of effect with that blowing up.
The idea that they're just about to push a button and blow themselves up, but they value living
because
until the moment that they push the button, and then they don't because they're dead. Come on, man. Are you saying there's no difference between somebody fighting to live and somebody who's strapping on a bomb to blow themselves up?
No. Now you are strawmanning him, right? You're strawmanning him. You are deliberately strawmanning him, right? Yeah, I know you're saying. Are you saying this? You're trying to strawmanning into getting rid of him, right? Because you don't want people to. You don't want to talk about UPB, right? You want people to go away, right? Say this is boring. It's boring. No. I don't need a. You read the book, and you have to read the whole book because my syllogisms don't work, right?
I'm talking about the means. Look, if the goal is to blow yourself,
are you saying there's no fundamental moral difference in terms of the value of life, their own value of their own life between these guys?
Doesn't
These two
matter.
people.
Doesn't matter.
Why is it necessarily? Why does it necessarily have moral content? If you're alone on an island and you are not blowing yourself up, or you are blowing yourself up, there's no moral content, really, is there? It depends on the situation, at least, right? If you are using somebody else's bomb, or you are blowing somebody else's cottage up, or it depends on the situation. And that's why you need that freaking moral principle to understand the situation you're in. You have to have the objects and say, okay, these objects and this object and this object. And then you can sort of try to, when you talk about it in a debate, say, okay, if this happens and this is the case, this is probably how the principle would work. And now you're talking about these, what's the called, sort of esoteric things about, is the man who's blowing him up valuing life before he blows it up, or when he blows it up, or after it's sort of on. It's not the normal life. I know that that's another situation that might be the case, and fine, but it feels more like you're trying to, okay, now I can find a sort of a little edgelord thing here. Right? You're actually behaving much like an edgelord. So you don't think so you don't understand the whole ethics, so fuck off, right?
Matter.
It doesn't matter.
I'll give you an example. I'll tell you exactly how, to the moment where he pushes the button and he dies, that he values life. Because if the goal is to blow up a building, you still need to be alive to do that. You still need to, or if it's even just the crate.
You have to die to do that.
I know.
You have to die to do that.
Right, and you still have. let me explain.
But now they are I think that Stefan Molyneux got exactly what he wanted. He wanted the caller to be on the defenses and feeling stupid trying to explain something that is sort of hard to, wrap your head around. It seems like unimportant when it comes to UPB. So he is deliberately trying to sidetrack the debate about UPB to something that sounds like the caller is ridiculous, right? So he doesn't have to deal with all these huge problems there are in UPB, which I pointed out through my whole deconstruction, right? So now it's about whether or not a suicide bomber values life or not. I mean, okay, Mr. Edgelord.
If the goal is to say, is to kill yourself, right? I don't even know how many virgins in heaven. And you need to do that. And the way you could do that is to blow yourself up. You still need to live to get to that goal. No matter what your goal is in life, you have to live first. And even in situations where you're going to die.
He doesn't have to value living, because that would be living as long as you can. That would be a good way to define it, in my opinion, right? If you value living, you value being alive as long as you possibly can, right? But you have to, even if you're a suicide bomber and you're flying a plane into a building, you have to value being alive, at least until the point where you don't have to be alive anymore to get to that goal, that sort of rational goal that you have, flying that building into that plane into that building, if we are talking about like 9/11, right? If he said, okay, I'm a suicide, I like to be dead, so why does he get on a plane, fly into a building, instead of just killing himself? If he does, so he does value life until he values death more than life, which is at the point when he's sure this plane is going to hit this building. And then he can say, okay, now I can die, right? So he has to value being alive until that point. The caller is right. You're just trying to sort of throw him around in the circus ring and make it look like he's stupid, right?
Your goal is to blow up the building. You have to die.
But the means...
And his goal is to blow up the building, and therefore he must die to achieve that.
Yes, but until he dies, he has to value living, because he has to be able
Oh my God.
live
If you repeat this again, I'm just going to move on to the next caller.
Oh, come on. Okay, so that is the goal. It is avoiding talking about UPB without talking about UPB, and actually use the callers to strengthen the inner circle into believing that people calling in and asking critical questions about UPB are actually stupid nihilists that are, weird and talking about suicide bombers in a way that Stefan Molyneux does not like, right? So he's only interested in getting people out of the way so nobody challenge his UPB, because he needs it, whether or not it's correct or usable. It functions, right? It doesn't function. You can't even understand it, so it's hard to say that it's functioning, because if you can't understand the manual to your car or whatever instrument you haven't tried before, well, then you can't use it, right? So he's only trying to get rid of him, so that and potentially use him in a way that solidifies his inner circle into believing, oh my God, I can't believe this stupid nihilist called in and talking about suicide bombers, and we want to stay alive, and you're talking about dying.
You're just repeating the same things over and over again. I fully accept he has to live in order to blow himself up. He can't blow himself up if he's dead. Yeah, I got it. Unless there's a kill switch. I don't know. But so what? Are you saying there's no difference between someone who's going down to the marketplace to get a latte and really, really is enjoying the day and wants to have a wonderful life, and some guy with a...
He didn't say that, right? You are storming him. You are trying to impose thinking on him that is not necessarily there. And now he's probably taking the bait, and you are going to throw him off the train because you're saying, I can't believe, oh my God, I can't believe you're talking about this, right? Well, suicide bombers is apparently a part of modern life, right? So it might be valuable to talk about it in some sense or another. And what does it really matter whether or not somebody likes their life or not? If it doesn't influence other people, it doesn't really matter that much, does it? It matters for that person's subjective experience, but that it doesn't necessarily have an influence on moral situations with other people, whether or not they are thinking of staying alive or whether or not they want to kill themselves, right? If they want to kill themselves in a way that brings 3,000 other people to their deaths, it might be interesting to, ponder about these things anyway.
Detonating vest on blah, blah, blah. I mean, are you saying that there's no difference in their value for their own lives?
Let's take the example with a latte, like you just said. Okay. Now, the person going to get the latte wants the latte. That's the goal, right? And to go get the latte, they have to be alive, right?
And if getting the latte, hang on, and if getting the latte meant that they had to die, would they want the latte?
No.
No. Okay. Now the guy who wants to blow up the building,
he is dragging him around and confusing him and putting up straw man and all sorts of stuff to get rid of him, right? It's pathetic. It's so pathetic, man. He wants to talk about your holy grail. I mean, come on. He's talking about your holy grail. You should be, I'm so happy somebody wants to talk about my holy grail, and I'm so happy to explain it to everybody. No. He's standing there looking like he'd rather, eat his own feces than talk to this guy, right?
Is willing to die to do it. So the guy who wants the latte won't accept death to get to the latte. But the guy who wants to blow up the building will welcome and embrace and initiate his own suicide in order to blow up the building.
Because dying is still, in the circumstances that you're talking about, dying is still an action.
Dying is an action. Gotcha.
Yes. Okay. So if dying is an action and you need a means to that action, and if the means is universally preferable, which means you prefer or value that mean to that end, to achieve that end, and life is required to die, then you have to value life to die. You have to value life to give up your own life and blow up some people. Just like you have to value life to walk.
No, he's not valuing life, for God's sakes, man.
No, he's not. He values being alive until he reaches that point where his rationality says that he has to die in order to accomplish some event or some action, whatever, right? That's all he's trying to say. He's having to. If this is a point where he has planned, I'm going to blow myself up at this point, and then he has to stay alive until he reaches that point where he can blow himself up. That's basically all he says, and he has to sort of prefer certain things or do certain things to accomplish that point. To get there, he can't just sit in his sofa and then wish himself flying into a building or something like that, right? He has to do something. He has to prefer sort of stuff to get to that building, right? I think that's all he's trying to say.
You don't say, I value this painting and then set fire to the goddamn thing. He's not valuing life because he's destroying it.
So you're talking about other people's life, but I don't think that's what the caller is talking about. He's not valuing the consequences his actions has for other people. No. But that's morality, right? But he's trying to take your version of ethics or morality and applying it to this kind of situation. And if he values this, or he prefers this, or he prefers that, he prefers to fucking blow himself up. There's nothing in UPB that says that you can't blow yourself up, right? It doesn't say that anywhere, right? So he's trying to attach your moral system to this a moral statement that could be, I must blow that building up by flying myself and other people in an airplane into it. That is my moral goal. How does that fit with UPB? But you're just like, are you crazy? You're blowing your own painting up, and are you stupid or what?
He's valuing is his time in heaven, or the aforementioned virgins, or maybe a relief from the agony of being who he is, or maybe it's compliance with his mother who tried to strangle him 14 times a day in his crib. I don't know. Maybe he's got voices in his head telling him to kill himself. But it is not life that he is valuing. It is something else that he's willing to sacrifice his life for.
So if I go to get a latte.
Okay, the caller is not that smart either. He should go on and get away from this latte thing, right? And another thing is that Stefan Molyneux does not like, actions. He likes behavior. So if you're talking about a latte, you are very close to a specific object, right? And he can't do that because that's not a part of his UPB. It is behavior, right?
I don't value the fact that I have 2 legs and can walk to go to the store to get a latte.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
I'm still talking about the means. You have to always value your means.
I just made an argument. What are you talking about legs for?
Because
you can't just make parallel arguments and think that you responded to anything. I just made an argument. You need to respond to the argument.
The argument that I believe you're making, and if I'm wrong, please correct me, is that you don't have to value the...
Can you look like you are pretty bored of a person trying to debate your moral system? Your moral system that is the holy grail of philosophy. He's trying his best to apply it to some, it may be a weird situation, but a situation nonetheless that, if you're talking 9/11, that resulted in, huge wars for decades in the Middle East, and all sorts of oppressive systems being pulled down on the population, and all these weird happenings, 9/11 conspiracies, that these buildings falling down without, how the hell did that happen? All these things, it has a sort of importance to it, right? You're just like, I can't believe you. Are you asking questions about my philosophy? You just have to read the book, right? And shut the fuck up and pay me some money.
Means to value the end. That's the argument you're making, right?
No, Well, what argument? I'm just curious what you heard. What argument did I just make? Because, in a debate, it's also important to have ears, right? So what argument did I just make?
You said that the guy wants to blow himself up, so he values that more than he values his life, because he wants to die. So if he wants to die,
he doesn't want to die. He wants something other than his life. Something is a higher value than his life. Because, a lot of the suicide bombers, of course, religiously motivated. They think that they're going to go to a better place. Or people who kill themselves because they're so unhappy, they seek an end to their suffering, which is preferable to a continuation of their suffering. So there's a value in direct opposition to their own continued existence that they prefer to their life, which is, has 72 virgins or an end to their suffering or whatever it is.
Right. And so what you're saying is that there is a value or a goal or an end, and that the means, which is living, you can value the goal, you can value the end, which is the 70, whatever, now you know the number of virgins is, but you don't have to value the means, which is living, because living is part of the means.
No, you must die.
Oh my God. Oh my God. I mean, a discussion about is morality subjective is sort of stranding on this weird understanding of whether or not it's living or, preferring to live or wanting to stay alive or something like that. This is what a discussion about morality subjective is apparently, stranding on. And that is ridiculous, right? I mean, any serious philosopher would sort of say, okay, let's back up a bit and see what are we really dealing with. It seems like we are going into, and the only thing I can conclude is that is exactly what Stefan Molyneux wants. He wants this guy to look absolutely stupid, label him as a nihilist, and label is as subjective. And when in the coming years, when people start to debate with him, they can refer to this weird guy, and you are just like that nihilist, and you're just like those subjective people who don't reject, rationality and reject, right? So they sort of fencing himself in his little, I'm right cage of, if you attack my UPB, you're proving UPB, right?
It's not like you don't value it. It's like you are willing to sacrifice it. You're willing to destroy it.
But you're not answering the question. If you have the goal,
I didn't hear a question. What was your question?
I asked you whether or not the argument, or whether or not you have to value the means to value the end.
I have no idea what you're talking about. I'm sorry, I don't.
Yeah, he has to value all the things you need to do to get to that point where he think he can blow himself up. Absolutely. He has to act in the world and do things and get on the train and get on the plane and find the bombs and, eat some breakfast and take a dump in the morning or whatever he needs to do, just like everybody else. The only difference is when he gets to that point and he's confirmed that all the things are in place as he has rationally planned should be in place, then he can blow himself up, right? Until that point, he's sort of just like everybody else in the world, right?
I don't know what you mean by means and ends here.
So the end is to die, and the end is to get the 72 virgins.
Yeah,
that's the end. Okay. Now, if we had a similar case where the end was to get a latte, right? You have two ends, which is to get 72 virgins and to get a latte. Now, to get a latte, you have to have a car or some more means of transportation, and you have to be living to go get a latte. You have to have money and all this stuff, right? Now, for each means that it takes to get a latte, you have to first value the means because you value the latte. Because to get the latte, you have to have all these other things in order to get the latte. So you have to value these things in order to obtain the end, which is the latte. And now in the case with the 72 virgins, living, part of getting the 72 virgins in this case is dying, okay? So dying is part of the end, part of the ends. Or actually dying in this case would actually be part of the means. But but you also have to live to get to that end first. You have to live.
Okay, I told you if you brought this up again. Everyone's alive.
I told you. I'm going to kick you off if you start to ask. He's trying to repeat the question that you asked him to repeat for you, right? And now you say, if you say that again, you asked him to repeat the question. I'm not going to say. Okay. Oh man! And you call yourself the biggest philosopher and biggest philosopher show on earth, and I don't know what. And you have found the holy grail of philosophy. Get the F out of here, man.
Until they die. Can we just not repeat that fucking point again, or I'm going to just shoot myself? Okay, I agree. Everyone's alive until they die.
Okay.
I'm just telling you, there's a T in the road.
Okay,
one leads left where you get to live, and the other leads right where you get to be cleaned up by.
How do you know that? That's your subjective opinion about other people's rationality. If you go this way, you'll die. You don't know that. That's the the trolley problem, right? You don't have that insight. That's a violation of basic epistemology. You can't say that this is life and this is death, right? Even the suicide bomber don't know if he's going to be blown up, right? He doesn't know that before it's done, and then he won't know it because then he's not alive anymore. But he can't know that beforehand. If it happens, it happens. If it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen, right? If he had turned left by mistake somewhere, he might have been run over by a truck and never get to blow himself up, but that meant he died. But if he were taking that guide from somebody else on the plane, or say on the bus or whatever, go left instead of right, then he might have been run down by a truck and never get to blow himself up. But that didn't mean that he would survive by going that way or something like that. It's a completely ridiculous discussion now. And a good philosopher would say, now we are sort of getting bogged down in little minutiae that we need to back up and think, what are we really discussing here? Because I want to extend this more principle and these moral ideas I have called UPB, and we need to get a sort of a better view, a better understanding, instead of attacking and say, if you repeat this question again, I'm going to throw you off free domain because we are so rational here.
A bomb disposal squad a couple of hours later when your bits of you are dripping from the ceiling. And so one leads to life and a continued enjoyment of future lattes, and the other leads to a sticky and gory end which you value higher than your own continued existence. And if you don't know that there's an
but all the caller is trying to say, from the point, if two people are going, the one is going to get a latte at that point in time called X, and the other one is going to blow over a building at that same point in time called X. They both have to value being alive until at least they get that latte, and equally well for that person going to blow himself up. They have to take the train or take a bicycle, bring on money or bring on, food or sunglasses or, whatever they need to get to that point. They have to value staying alive until whatever they need to do in that, be that blowing themselves up or have a latte at the cafe. They are doing some of the same kind of things until they reach that point. That's all he's trying to say. You can't see the difference until you reach that point X, where this guy blows himself up and this guy is sort of having a latte, right?
Opposition in values to that which allows for the continuation of your own life, and that through you are directly choosing the end of your own life. I don't even know what to say to you. Like there's no amount of sophistry that's going to take that bold choice. You're just basically saying that north and south are exactly the same. I just don't even know what to say.
This isn't an argument. I mean, I just said that, and you at least said, but you didn't bring up the objection to the latte case, that if you wanted a latte, you would have to value all of those means. Correct?
Let's just say $5. Okay, so if you want a latte, you need $5.
You need
so you value the $5 as a means for getting your latte.
Yeah, until you get the latte, you have to value the $5. Until you get the latte in your hand and start drinking it, you have to value the $5.
Now, do you admit and agree that when you hand the $5 over to get the latte, that you are valuing the latte?
Yeah, but he's not talking at that point. He's talking about the amount of or the time period until that point, right? You don't even understand what the frick he's talking about. It's pretty simple. until he gets to that point, he can lose his $5 on a latte, and this guy wants to stay alive until he can blow himself up, right? This guy wants to stay alive until he is going to do what he wants. This guy going to do the same thing until he gets what he wants. This guy wants to stay alive possibly after he gets the latte, but until that point in time, if they get the latte and blow building up at the same time, they are wanting to stay alive. So,
more than your $5.
Yes, at that point.
Then you have lost the case, right?
No, I haven't, because
you absolutely have. You may not be aware of it, but the whole trapdoor of logic just opened up underneath you.
Let me explain. To get
I'm going to give you a few more minutes, but not much more than that. But go ahead.
To get to the goal of the 72 virgins, you have to die, and to get to the goal of dying, you have to live. So until the point where you die,
until you hand over your $5 for the latte, I fully agree that you value the $5.
Right. So
and then you.
Yeah, but the point is, it's at that time, all the time that goes on before that it happens, the latte or the suicide bomb. This is where morality is in function and should function until something happened at the time X that shouldn't happen. And afterwards, it's too late. The guy is actually attacking this at the right end. He's saying all these things that happen here before X is where the morality should be applied in order to something at the point X not to happen, because that would have an immoral effect. But if it happens at that point in time, it's too late, because it has to be adjusted here in this time before that point in time. Otherwise, it will happen, possibly, right? But the way for things not to happen in an immoral fashion is that people are applying the moral principle as they go along in their everyday life, so they don't end up in that point where they're going to, for instance, blow a building up, right?
Willing to hand it over for the latte, which means you prefer the latte to your $5, which means that you have a higher value than your $5 in the same way. When you kill yourself, you have a preference for non-existence over life.
And then once the person dies, they're no longer a moral agent, so it doesn't matter.
Got it. Okay, I'm going to move on to the next caller because I feel I'm done and dusted, but thank you very much for your call. It was very, very entertaining. All right, let's move on to the next.
Very entertaining. Very entertaining. It was very entertaining. It's like this is just entertainment. You're discussing your fantastic holy grail of philosophy, and it's just entertainment. It's like, oh, this was an interesting, funny guy. He's talking about latte and suicide bombers. That was kind of cute. So you're not really taking ethics that seriously, are you? You're not taking it very seriously. You're just, throwing people off the train here to get rid of them because they ask critical questions about your moral philosophy. And it stinks like a dead animal, right? There's nothing cohesive about UPB. It's largest piece of junk I have ever written about ethics. It's so incoherent and so confusing and so badly written, and so all the things you shouldn't do is there, and the things you should do isn't there, right? There are no metaphysics, there's no epistemology, and if there is, it's just thrown in here and there where you need it, and then you back out again, right? There are no definitions of any important things except truth, which is then so confusing that nobody can use it, right? And now you're sort of lecturing this guy on whatever it is you're trying to do about a question that is pretty decent. And then you try to sort of run it into the ground by, manipulating the discussion into some suicide bomber or latte, right? It's decently okay, but it's not about morality. It's subjective, is it, right? So, my respect for this kind of philosophy can sit on a very, very small place. That's for sure. Okay, I think that was all for now. I hope you enjoyed. See you in the next video.